Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Save Our Schools with Dear JCPS. Today is July 17th. I'm Gay Adelman and my co-host is
Ivonne Rivera, sidekick extraordinaire.
Absolutely. So we are broadcasting live on, well, not live on Zoom to ourselves only because we are having to pre-record another episode until we get this technology figured out to work exactly the way that we want it to. Some of you may have watched as we attempted to do a Facebook Live stream just a few moments ago. Ivonne has a nice little 5-minute video out there. I highly recommend you go watch of her trying to add me onto the screen and not even being able to stop the video. It just continued to record. So, you know, there were 2 attempts by me prior to that, so I'm not going to just throw Ivonne under the bus. I made 2 attempts myself, and I couldn't figure out how to add her either. So obviously going live on Facebook is a goal that we have in the future. But in the meantime, we're going to pre-record our this episode on Zoom, and we'll be uploading it to Forward Radio 106.5 FM today for the 3 o'clock broadcast. And you can catch the replays Saturday at 7 a.m. and the following Thursday at 6 p.m. On this week's program, we're going to cover some things that have happened in education over the past week or so and talk about some of the things coming up. We talk about politics, we talk about legislation, we talk about the behind the scenes goings on, as well as things that are up for a decision, such as the new schedule. The new school schedule has been announced by the superintendent last night, Thursday night. He shared with us what he plans to propose to the school board at the Tuesday night school board meeting. So we're going to talk about that. We also had a meeting, a Zoom call with Dr. Polio yesterday morning. And so we want to give you an update on some of the things that we talked about on that call as well. And in today's episode, we'll be talking about the tax increase that's been proposed and where that stands. We'll be talking about student assignment plan and obviously going back to school, virtual versus in person. We'll talk about what's on the agenda for the board meeting on Tuesday, and then just give you some updates on some of the things that we've been working on throughout the either the past week or even on an ongoing basis. A lot of the things that we work on are long-term and continue moving behind the scenes even when they're not on top of mind. So Ivonne, did I forget anything in that intro before we get started?
Let me take a quickie look. Just a passing reference to the town hall that Kentucky Educators United have, and that there will be a new one when we will be slightly more ready for prime time.
Well, and I do want you to give us an update on how that call went, and hopefully we can do that closer to the end of the program.
Sure.
Because I see that as a what are we going to do about it kind of thing. And I really am excited to see some of the things that KEU is working on, and want to be able to spend some time on that at the end of the show. So we met with Marty yesterday, and one of the things that I asked him was about the educators that had been arrested on Attorney General Cameron's yard the other day. We know that 87 people were arrested, and we know that one of them was a principal. That was in the paper. I believe that there will be more educators named in the future as more and more information comes out about those situations. And so I wanted to stress to him my concerns that, you know, we have a teacher shortage, especially teachers of color. And I wanted to get a commitment from him that he would not seek any type of punishment, because I know that the press and the conservative party in particular would like to see teachers and educators that stood up for justice, essentially stood up for justice for Breonna Taylor. I'm sure there are people that would like to see them and make an issue out of this when it really isn't. This was a peaceful protest. The charges are trumped up. They are upcharged, as they say. It's an abuse of power. It's a lot of things, and it's certainly not anything that puts our students in jeopardy. In fact, it's more that it sets a good example for students on how to use civil disobedience when laws are harmful and when processes are broken and when justice has not been served and nothing else is working. Asking nice doesn't work. We've learned that asking nice doesn't work. So these are ways to draw attention in a peaceful and meaningful way. And I was able to get a commitment from Dr. Polio. Long story short is he confirmed that as long as he believes that, what he told me is he believes that this will go on for an extended period of time. It won't just quietly go away. He's prepared for that. He says that if he's confident that these charges will be reduced, if not dropped completely. So he's hoping that all of this will be a non-issue, because as long as there are no charges on these educators, then there's nothing to hold them accountable for. The only thing that he issued a caveat on was if this is determined to be a violent felony, if the trumped up charges do stay and somehow get labeled violent, then that gets turned over to the EPSB. And Yvonne can tell you more about what EPSB stands for in just a second. But that's out of his hands. And I said, I don't expect you to speak for EPSB. I wanted to know what the district stance is and would they protect these educators. And he indicated that he recognizes how valuable and important that they are and that he would not seek any punishment against them. So I was relieved to hear that. That was one of the updates I wanted to share with everybody. Yvonne, tell us more about EPSB.
Okay, EPSB is the Education Professional Standards Board, but this is sort of the state equivalent of the KBA or the KMA. That is, it's now the KBA for lawyers and the KMA for doctors are a separate organization, but the EPSB is actually part of the government, and they determine, you know, whether you get your certification to teach. You know, basically think of it as a license, just like a license to practice law or a license to practice medicine. And it's just like you can be disbarred by the Kentucky Bar Association, and you can have your medical license revoked by the Kentucky Medical Association in the same way you can have your certification revoked if you don't do what you're supposed to do and felonies are up there. I think Dan Cameron was not specifically targeting teachers. I think he just wanted to give everybody who had the nerve to stand up to him a felony record. I noticed that he did not have Frankfort police charge the I want the freedom to kill my neighbor people with intimidating a participant in the legal process. So we should ask about that.
I think they have, and I think it will. I'm hoping that Dr. Polio is right, that the public will see what's really going on and the agendas that are really at play and not allow this kind of bullying and shenanigans to take place. But, you know, our goal on this program is to just keep the public informed and aware so that if things kind of escalate and we see this getting trumped up and sent to EPSB, then the public needs to become outraged. We should already be outraged, but we need to come to the defense of these teachers and educators who may be the target of some intimidation tactics that have been seen before. We saw it when people went to Frankfort, and many of them were educators then too. And even though I was there were a lot of non-educators there too. We saw that they requested the sign-in logs and looked through the list for who the teachers were. So we know that they're going to try tactics like this, and we need to be ready to come to the defense of our educators who are standing up for their students. Just like we did, just like Kumar Rashad was doing, you know, when he stood up against Commissioner Wayne Lewis. And we saw that they still targeted him and put him through the ringer on that. So as long as we're paying attention, we can hopefully keep them doing the right things, keep them more honest. The visibility makes a lot of difference. So on to the next topic on the agenda is the tax increase and the student assignment plan. I've got them lumped together even though they really are two separate things, because really the student assignment plan is a shorter term goal. It was originally expected to be on the board agenda this coming Tuesday, but with the changes to the schedule and the school calendar and teaching NTI versus in-person instruction and all the attention that has been required to be focused on that, they've postponed the student assignment plan. And Dr. Polio does say, he wants to get this right. There's no sense in rushing it, and we appreciate that, because my concerns about the student assignment plan are that the dual resides and no push-outs is a nice start, but it doesn't go far enough. And we've seen 2 decades of students being bused from their communities and the harm that has caused for our families in the West End. And we wanted integrated schools, but we did it at their expense. And so to simply just say, okay, from here on out, you can now have the same opportunities as the rest of us, when really they don't, because building the schools isn't enough to provide quality education and programming. It's not just about a building. The building is important, and it's the right first step, because we can't even quote unquote end busing unless we build enough schools in the West End so that students can choose a school close to their home. So we're not even giving them the same opportunities and choices that the rest of us have until we have built those schools. And the only way we're going to build those schools is by passing the tax increase. So we know as a community that this is necessary, but it doesn't go far enough yet. There hasn't been enough demonstration that they are going to do what they say they're going to do, and that their good intentions, our good intentions, I'm going to include myself in that. There hasn't been enough demonstration that our good intentions won't lead to unintended consequences. Because in the past, when we think we have a good idea, we jump on it, we run with it, and we don't wait for the impacted community's input. What's really great about this particular window of time is that we have time. We have between now and November 3rd, because it is likely that this tax increase question will be on the November ballot. The community in the West End who we think would benefit by these schools being built are not in support of a tax increase yet. So we have work to do. We need to make sure we are in that community and listening to impacted community members and taking their feedback, making sure they have a seat at the table, but also taking their feedback to our communities. As I hear concerns, I need to be taking that back to my community, to organizations that are where people look more like me, and voicing the concerns and making sure that the student assignment plan isn't just a Band-Aid, and making sure it isn't just a quick fix. We have to make sure that we make repairs for the last 2 decades of harm and damage that has been done to these families. We need to make sure that we have systems in place that will create integrated schools in an equitable way, so that there is just as many families coming from East and South to West End schools as there are students choosing to go from the West End to a school in the South or East. So that is our goal, and just simply removing the barrier so that students can have the option to choose a school close to home when we haven't even built the schools. It's too many things that have to be taken on faith. And a community that has not seen a reliable performance from a district over the past 2 decades can't be asked to just once again trust us. So we're not there yet. It's not to say we won't be there yet, but that is, you may have seen the pledge that I sent around for Dear JCPS. I sent out a pledge Thursday night to some email subscribers, just a couple thousand that I have. I don't have a whole lot. But I sent it out and asked them to sign the pledge. And because I had heard from the Kentucky Alliance that they have not made a decision. I'm on the board of the Kentucky Alliance, full disclosure. I've been in their board meetings since January where I, being in favor of the tax increase, have brought up this topic every single month that we need to be in support of a tax increase. And the consensus on the board is not ready to make a decision one way or the other. So the Kentucky Alliance has not come out in support of the tax increase. The neighborhood associations, there's a new coalition that has been formed that is made up of several neighborhood community homeowners associations in the West End, and they have their own coalition now. It's led by Danita Wright. I've been invited to a couple of those Zoom calls, and I've listened into those homeowners, chairmen, presidents, whatever their title is called, from the different neighborhoods. And I hear a lot of reluctance to just trust passage of an unconditional tax increase, a tax increase that is tied to a student assignment plan that hasn't even been passed yet, a tax increase that says it's designed to build more buildings, but the buildings alone won't bring people to those schools. We have schools that aren't fully subscribed in the West End now. Now, a lot of that is because of barriers, including last I checked, and I need to check and see if this is still the case, but in order to even apply to attend a school close to home, if you live in the West End, you have to have a 2.5 grade point average. You can't have any behavior or any discipline issues. So we've created a barrier so that families who want to send their child to a school close to home don't even have the opportunity to apply to do so because of possibly something that was caused by the fact that they've been bussed out of their neighborhood in the first place. So we set them up for failure, and then we punish them for that failure. And, you know, regardless of this dual resides and no push outs and the other things that they're discussing, we could remove that barrier tomorrow. We don't even have to wait for a student assignment plan to be passed. Just let people who live in the West End apply to a school close to their home. Why wouldn't we allow that now? But one of the reasons why is because principals don't want it. I know for a fact that that principals will resist removing these application barriers because certain schools will be treated as quote unquote sweeper schools. And then because there's so much emphasis on high stakes test scores, the district is set up so that schools tend to push students who don't score well on tests into schools that don't have SBDM power, don't have strong parent involvement, don't have a lot of scrutiny from the public. So then you end up with high saturation levels of students that need greater resources provided to them. And so it suffocates the school system when it tries to care for the students who need our care the most. So it's a whole system of failures that need to be completely flipped. And there is a roadmap to do that. You know, this isn't unique to Jefferson County. This isn't even unique to Kentucky. This has been going on across the country. And we can look at what has happened in these other states and other communities and avoid, take a detour around all of these problems. We are perfectly poised to do so because we don't yet have charter schools. We don't have vouchers. The vultures are here. They're lurking. They're behind the big petition that what you saw that was trying to get people to sign on to get the measure on the ballot. At the last minute, I know it seems contradictory that I also supported getting the measure on the ballot, but the reason I did is because of what I just explained. We have to make time for these conversations. We have to allow the community to understand and participate in the discussion.
One of the things that we need to stress is that what we think doesn't matter. What matters is what the West End thinks. And if we have 100% faith in JCPS that they are going to do all of the right things, not just build these schools, but create smaller classrooms, install wraparound services. You know, the West End's been a lot like Charlie Brown with Lucy and the Football. You know, for decades, you know, oh, we're going to do this. And then either this didn't happen at all or was done kind of in a halfway way where, you know, it just was not what was promised. So we have to figure out how to answer the question, why should you believe us now? And if I were the genius who knew that answer, I should be Joe Biden's running mate, okay? If I were that smart, I should be vice president, okay? But I'm not. But somebody out there, you know, we is better than me. A lot of us together crowdsourcing ideas may be able to come up with something to say, okay, we get it. You haven't been believing us because of history, but here's how we can make it right.
Right.
And I wasn't saying that that gay's not smart or whatever. I'm just saying it doesn't matter what a bunch of white people in the East End are saying.
Right.
Because they've said a lot of things.
And, you know, and the things that I say aren't my original ideas. I may put them out there like they're my ideas sometimes, but it's just because I've been listening. You know, and sometimes I'll hear a good idea here and a good idea here, and I put it together into a package idea, because that's what I do. That's my background. My background is marketing. My background is corporate communications. And in my career, my job was to be given a task that I had to communicate to the public or, you know, to an internal team. And if I just put it out there the way that the department who brought it to me presented it, you know, and I didn't check with operations, and I didn't check with the mailroom, and I didn't check with the web people, and I didn't check with, you know, you have to do consensus building. And it's just my nature. I've been formally trained, and I used to get paid really well to do this kind of work. So I take feedback and streamline it and put together flows of how things work and come up with taglines and graphics, and I communicate it to the world. So it doesn't mean it was ever my idea. It's just that's been the role that I've played in organizations, and they're not my ideas at all. But I do hear, you know, having had a son at Shawnee, and hearing from families that finally got in or whatever, I realized, wait, why was there a barrier for you to get in? We have lots of room in Shawnee, you know. And then it turns out, well, the principal didn't want them because, you know, they bring the test scores down, and, you know, they're not getting the extra resources they need. So what we need to be making sure is the schools in the West End, and this is back to my point, and again, they're not my ideas, and we need to make them better, but I'll throw the first one to the wall and see what sticks. And then let's bring the impacted community members together to get to the table to flesh it out. And the Kentucky Alliance, as I mentioned earlier, where I serve on the board, that's a coalition. That's what we do. We are coalition builders as well. And we hold people's agenda meetings where people bring their own concerns to the meeting. We haven't been able to do that obviously under COVID, but that's that's how I became involved with the Kentucky Alliance. Is I would go to the people's agenda meetings every Sunday, because we mostly talked about education, and it was some of the best brainstorming meetings that I was able to attend. So the Kentucky Alliance is a great organization to bring Black and Black allied voices together to the table to put together, you know, what they've been calling the Black agenda. This is something they've been working on for years. I think I've been urging them to go ahead and get their Black agenda finalized. Again, it would not be up to Ivonne and me to figure out what should be on the Black agenda, but we can certainly facilitate some of the meetings that need to take place. You know, use some of our privilege and access to arrange meetings with people who can make decisions and who need to hear it more than once. Again, just like marketing, just like branding, you can't say something once and expect the whole world to suddenly buy your product. So, you know, since December, Latasha Harrison and Latasha's with the Louisville PTO. Latasha and I have been meeting with Dr. Polio to help him get some of that feedback and process some of that feedback that we've been receiving. And a lot of what you've seen with the development of the proposal for the tax increase has been guided by some of the feedback that we've provided. But that's dangerous too, because sometimes these ideas only get half baked before they run off, and that's what we're cautioning right now. We haven't been fully heard yet. The Black community especially has not been fully heard yet, and we need to slow down. We need to make sure that it's on the ballot. And we made a mistake as a community and a district. We made a mistake in waiting until now several times, but formally in May, I presented it to a quorum of representatives from the different organizations that are members of EROS, and we agreed to move forward with a pro public education pledge. And the idea was that the current petition that was out there, which was headed up by the Tea Party group and was marketed by ALEC. We know that the privatizers are here and that are behind that petition. They were able to get over 40,000 signatures, and we were tone deaf by not recognizing that the Black community was not on board with the tax increase yet. So we set it up and made it possible for in order for their voices to be heard, for them to align themselves with the Tea Party. So we avoided an opportunity to position ourselves as pro-public education, have people sign on to support the tax increase as long as it does the things it says it's going to do, which is all we were trying to do all along. We don't support an unconditional tax increase. Who does? I mean, seriously. And the people that are now saying that, we should support this no matter what, when the Black community has not expressed support, unconditional support. I'm not saying that they won't. I just think that we need to slow down. We need to advocate with and for the Black community for the other issues that they're also currently dealing with. Don't forget that that community has been at a higher risk for death and illness from coronavirus. That they're currently undergoing the over-policing of their bodies, even when they try to peacefully protest, that they've been terrorized when they peacefully protest because they've seen snipers on rooftops and wrongful arrests and assaults and pepper spray and various things that are targeting them because of the demonstrations that are taking place in the Black Lives movement. And so there's a lot going on. They still haven't gotten justice for Breonna. We still haven't seen these police officers other than one being removed from his position only to be hired somewhere else. He's not experiencing the same Breonna's not getting justice. So there's still a need to create that pressure. So if the white community could maybe come on over and help us continue to advocate for justice in areas where it's most urgent, then we can all move forward between now and November towards supporting the justice that we need in our education system. And so, like I said, building buildings by itself is not going to be enough. We have to make sure we have the kinds of programs that the Black community and the West End community in particular would choose to stay home for. We have to rebrand some of these schools because my son went to Shawnee, but when I would talk to Black families about whether or not they would send their child to Shawnee, they had a different response simply because of the stigma that is associated with Shawnee. My son being white can immediately overcome whatever stigma someone might have against him when he says, I went to Shawnee, because people assume that he must have, been in the aviation magnet. He would get that all the time. Well, there are a lot of Black kids in the aviation magnet too, but if somebody says, where did you go to school? And they say Shawnee, everybody kind of says, oh, like maybe, because you couldn't get in at the manual or the whatever. So there's a stigma that has to be rebranded. These schools have to be rebranded. And I think our current leadership is making great strides in that area. I don't want to sound like I'm saying anything negative against the work that Dr. Polio is doing and that the board is doing. But we can always do better. We can always continue to support the district as they make these difficult changes. And get commitments for smaller class sizes and the trauma-informed care that we're going to need in schools that have higher density of students that are dealing with trauma and special needs and English language learners, and appropriate the resources properly so that these schools are set up to be successful. And then you will see teachers that are mission driven being attracted to these schools again. It was happening when my son was at Shawnee. There were a lot of mission driven teachers there. We were under great leadership that pushed back on the administration. And unfortunately, I saw how that ended for him. So we have to flip the script. And so my point is the student assignment plan doesn't go far enough. We need to, that was a proposal that was put together pre-pandemic and pre-movement for Black Lives. So, let's shift our focus a little bit more towards what else can we ask the district to do. We can, and in fact, I brought this up with Dr. Polio. I didn't get an answer from him yet because, like I said, it's going to take 2 or 3 times for some of these ideas to percolate. But I also brought up that, the district could make a real show of support for the Black community right now by saying we're going to shift our resources from SROs to counselors, smaller class sizes, and trauma-informed care. That's a no-brainer in this environment. We've seen now we've seen why Black families tell us they don't feel comfortable with police in schools, and so we need more bodies in schools. We need more trained adults in schools, but they don't need to necessarily be trained to spot crime and treat everything like a crime.
Well, you still have the situation where some people don't see what's right in front of them. That's not reassuring. I mean, how many videos do you have to see, Scully, before you believe? So, you see people saying, oh, defund the police. That's too much. We have, as you said, and that hammer nail analogy works here too. When you're a policeman, arresting people is like your only tool. We don't need cops in schools because of that. And, I'm getting to the point where I'm thinking, if you can't see it, how do I make you see it?
Well, and not only that, the expression, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure really fits here because it is so much less expensive to have pre-K. These are some other things that we should be suggesting. It would be really nice if the groups that can articulate this could also come to these meetings. So I speak about Louisville PTO again, needs to have a seat at the table. Tyra Walker with the Kentucky Alliance needs to have a seat at the table. The Neighborhood Association that Danita Wright has been chairing needs to have a seat at the table. But I do know that when we as a group, the quorum that met for ARROS, the Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools, and let's try and remember who all the members are. Okay, so it's Dear JCPS and LSURGE and KFTC, Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, JCTA, Fellowship of Reconciliation, League of Women Voters, and Kentucky Alliance. So that's, did I get them all? Seven
Yes.
organizations that are members. And 5 of us were on the call the day that we agreed to move forward with this pledge and a website and some FAQs and position ourselves as pro-public education so that we could start capturing signatures of people who wanted to support the tax increase. Never said anything about supporting an unconditional tax increase, by the way. And even if we did, I'm pretty sure it would have had caveats along the lines of, with the exception of war, famine, and pandemic. Like there are caveats to everything, and nothing is unconditional. There's absolutely no reason why you would give an administration that can change on a whim. Again, no disrespect to Dr. Polio and the work that he's doing, but if he's doing a great job, which he is, there's reason to think that he's going to be plucked away and be asked to go run a different district at some point, or maybe have some kind of job in Frankfurt, or who knows. He won't always be our superintendent, no matter how much we want to keep him. And on top of that, our board can change. Our board can change as soon as this coming November. And at some point after our quorum agreed to move forward with this pledge and this website, we were told that we had decided to wait, even though a vote was never taken to wait. The vote was taken to move forward, but somehow unilaterally, after a conversation that seems to have taken place between the AROS chair and the consulting firm that JCPS had hired, I'm still trying to get to the bottom of it to figure out how that conversation took place and how it was translated into we need to wait. But it did get translated that way, not once, but at least twice or three times. And so by the time the ballot signatures were up for a vote, and our work had been admonished repeatedly, so it's lost in interpretation somewhere, and we're going to continue to work to get to the bottom of how grassroots organizations continue to be derailed and continue to be usurped. And we encourage people to keep an eye on what's happening in AROS. Our next monthly meeting is July 27th. It's a Monday night. If you are part of an organization that would like to join AROS, I encourage you to reach out to Chris Harmer, who is the chair. He has been the chair for, I guess, 3 years, ever since the organization was formed by JCTA after Tammy Berlin called in a bunch of different organizations and asked our interest in participating in a coalition like this. And I agreed. Those of us who are charter members, 6 of the 7 have been members since the beginning. We don't know how Chris became chair. There was not really an election, and he's been chair for 3 years now. And we've asked, okay, how do we democratically elect a new chair? And we haven't been able to get good answers. So there are some things that don't feel right. They don't pass the smell test. And you know me, I'm going to keep pushing until I get to the bottom of it, because it's harming our students. It's harming our Black and Black allied organizations in our ability to organize and have leverage and have a seat at the table. And that's unacceptable. So, Ivonne, what are your thoughts on that? You've been there, you saw it.
Yes. Part of it is that whether they're conspiring against us or they're just mistaken, the outcome's the same.
Right.
We have, if it's a case of we white people know better, we know what people in the West End should want, poor benighted souls who don't know what's best for them. It doesn't matter. This is incredibly condescending to say that this is what we're going to do for Black students,
whether they like it or not.
Whether they know enough to like it or not.
Okay, that's even worse. You're right.
They may be too dumb to see, but here we are. We've got it here. No need to discuss this further, because we've got it. We got it.
So, for those of you who are watching our broadcast, this is Save Our Schools with Dear JCPS. It's the July 17th episode. If you're listening to us on Forward Radio 106.5 FM, you can catch us. You can catch replays of our show on SoundCloud. And I want to shift the dialogue now to the fact that the district has had a couple of events this week. One was kind of, I guess, like a town hall. Would you call it a town hall? The first one where they
the one on Monday?
Yeah.
That's what they called it. So I'm going to call it a town hall too.
I mean, and they did get 600 questions from people, and I think they're making an effort to address.
They answered mine, and kudos for that. 600's a lot.
And I think they're trying to come up with mainstream solutions first, which is the right thing to do. We have to get the masses taken care of so we can focus on everyone else. And we've got students whose families, for various reasons, are not able to participate in NTI. They may be essential workers who have to work and who are just dead tired when they get home. And or they can only do homework with their kids on weekends and evenings, and so we have to have schedules that are flexible. Or they may just not be equipped. But we have students with very high needs, and I was reading a comment from one of the moms who herself said, "I'm just not equipped to be with my high needs student all day and provide them with the therapies and the things that they need." So we have to be cognizant that the district has been responsible for these students. This is an example of the kinds of work, valuable, meaningful work that our public schools, services that our public schools provide, and the void that is created when in-person school is no longer an option for these families. And then, we've also got students who don't have internet or don't have enough devices in their home. And even though the district is working on making sure that these gaps are filled, it still doesn't mean that someone's going to be there to troubleshoot when the internet goes down, or when the device is giving you an error, or you have to share with 3 siblings. And there's lots of challenges that immediate solutions won't address right away. We have to dig deep.
I think people may know this, but I want to stress to make sure everybody does understand that we have been put in a situation. We have almost 140,000 dead people. We're going on to 3 million. We're past 3 million cases, aren't we? There are no good answers.
None.
There are only terrible,
or worse.
I don't even know if there's even less terrible answers. There's only terrible answers. Gay and I were talking earlier about Israel, where they reopened schools, and Israel's Israel. People wear their masks. They do what they're supposed to do. Kids are, as they would say, 2 meters apart, 6 feet apart. And one school had 100 cases. 100 cases, one school. So reopening, if you're saying what Madison County was saying, I hope they're going to reconsider that you're going to slap masks on every kid and nothing else will, and you take a temperature check in the morning and nothing else is different.
Right.
Kids are crowded just as close together. Oh, and they get to eat them. Okay, there's that. Band-Aids, all. A mask is not a magic wand. Wearing a mask goes with social distancing. It is not a replacement for it. So you slap masks on every kid. They're still free to a seat on a bus. They're sitting, you've got 28 kids in a classroom, 30 or whatever the allotment is, 35 in a high school, whatever it is, you're going to end up worse than Israel. So you are.
And the people who are upset that schools are closed seem to also be the same people that aren't wearing masks, or who say it's a hoax, or who say, and so their lack of concern for the safety of our students is why we can't open schools. So if people would get with the program and start wearing their masks and keeping people safe, then maybe we could start inching back to in-person schooling. And so to your point, we need to start also thinking about once we know we're in NTI for 6 weeks, which we know that's the proposal, and it'll be voted on Tuesday night at the school board meeting, which, by the way, I want to use this opportunity to make a plug. Use this opportunity to do a few things to let your board members know. I mentioned this earlier on my little intro yesterday that I did, but since it's likely that NTI for 6 weeks is going to pass, if you support staying home and doing NTI, great. I don't think you need to be the one being vocal right now, because that's 99% going to happen. What our board members need to hear right now is from families who this plan will put them at a disadvantage. And like Ivonne said, there are no magic solutions and magic answers, but we is better than me. And if we haven't thought of all these scenarios because we didn't hear from impacted community members, we might make well-intended decisions that have harmful unintended consequences. So there's a survey you can take on Dear JCPS. Just go to dearjcps.com, and it's really just a a few questions, and if you check that you're a parent and an educator, then it pops up more boxes that are specific to parents and educators. And let us know. We also want to hear from teachers. We want to hear from teachers who maybe you want to return to in-person school because you think that, I'm not even gonna say you think, that there are students who are suffering because they don't have access to in-person school, and you're in a low risk category, which makes you an essential worker. If you're willing to work and you're in low risk, and you know that these students would be better off having one-on-one support, these families would be better off having one-on-one support instead of working from home, then you might say, yes, I would be one of those volunteers. And I don't mean volunteer by pay. I think you should get paid hazard pay, like time and a half or something. But if you would be willing to be one of the first teachers back in the classroom, because we know at some point we will be phasing back in. And so, you can answer the survey to let us know that, yes, you are one of those teachers that would be willing to show up in person because you're not exposing anyone at home that's in a high risk category that you know of, hopefully, that there aren't any underlying conditions in your household, or that you yourself don't have any. And then we also want to hear from parents who say, I really need some other alternative, and maybe it's a co-op of some sort that we haven't even thought of yet. Think outside the box. No more than 6 to a pod. Come up with social distancing guidelines that keep everyone safe, and that's what that next phase looks like. And so, the more real life examples that our board members can hear from you, the better. They're more likely they are to come up with solutions that benefit everyone, and it doesn't have to be one size fits all.
And also, if you're like me and you're kind of grateful about the NTI, there's nothing wrong about calling them and thanking them. I thanked Chris Kolb. You guys know I had cancer. I was bald. And I actually had a good cancer, and I wasn't as terrified as my husband about going back. I wasn't as worried about myself, but there was going to be one person retiring from my school at the end of last year. And then by May, it was 3. And now it is, that I know of, is 5, but it may be more.
Well, and while we're on the subject, I'm going to share my screen for those who are watching the Facebook video and show you what the survey results look like so far. We've gotten this, I pulled this data down about an hour ago. We have close to 200 survey respondents. And when we asked the parents what they thought, 68% of parents said they would opt for NTI. 24% still would send their children to in-person school. And then there's a 8% that's still undecided, depending on how things go. Again, none of this is unconditional. We need to see what kind of protocols are in place before we're willing to step back in that classroom, and that's very understandable. Or send our kids back in this case, since it's parents. And then we also asked them about their technology and in-home support. And 75% of our families have no problem with NTI, which is great. That is great news. That's even higher than Dr. Polio's estimate, where he said 65% of families do well. And I didn't ask if you do well or not. I just asked if you had a problem accessing it. But I don't think people would be likely to say that they had no problem if it was a burden for them. So, but then we also asked if families need to work or have difficulty finding supportive adults in the household to help with the work, and close to 20% said that. And then another 7% said that they still need help with devices and internet. So I know the district is working on that, but there's still going to be, even as they close that gap, there's still going to be a few. And again, it's not one and done type situation. So on the teachers' opinions, we asked, and 22% said they would be willing to return in person. 53 said they would still prefer to do NTI. 16%, to your point about the number of teachers that have said they would possibly be retiring, 16% of our teachers that answered this survey are looking at other career options if they're forced to go back in person anytime soon. And then another 9% just isn't sure. So only half of our teachers are looking at continuing to do NTI, and the others we need to pay close attention to, because we could end up having a huge market shift, not only in those who attend our public schools, but also those who are available to teach in them. And then 65% of our teachers tell us they have someone in their household, either they or someone else in their household is a health risk factor. So only 35% could come back safely if we were to reopen right away. So, again, come to dearjcps.com and complete the survey. Also on dearjcps.com/advocate is a page that is dedicated for you to be able to reach out to your board member. You can email them all at once, just clicking on a link, or you can tweet them on Twitter. Right? Tweet them on Twitter. And be sure and let them know what your concerns are. And to Yvonne's point too about letting them know, thanking them, we do need to stay vocal and thank them for doing the right thing, because there is also another segment of our population that is more driven by money and profits and margins, the business community in particular, who is now thinking, oh my gosh, this was a big source of revenue for me, being able to sell my goods or whatever to public schools, but it's still not worth the lives that would be lost, and the health risks, the unknown health risks that we'd be subjecting our families and teachers to.
1/3 of teachers are more than 50. That's not talking about people who have diabetes, or they're younger than that and they had cancer. This is just old people like me. I'm 62. 1/3 of them. So they're at risk just by still being alive. So that's 33% right there. And you have better figures where they're saying somebody in my household, people have children with autoimmune, issues, they might have something. A lot of people are at risk. I think nationally it's like 2/3 of people are either older or they've got comorbidities that if they get COVID, it will be ugly. And, one thing that we forget with COVID is it's not just death.
Right.
It's not just death. People can live and have impaired lung functions for the rest of their lives, including children. The proportions of children now being identified as having COVID has increased because they're testing more. It used to be that just getting sick wasn't enough to get a test, remember? So right. Kids who may have had it, got super sick, were not ID'd. That, so again, I said there's no good answers. And NTI is terrible. NTI is terrible. I'm not going to defend it, although we're not going to have NTI this time.
Virtual Academy. Let's call it something.
We're going to have virtual academies, which are much, much better.
And hopefully the 75% who check that box will be extremely satisfied. But we got to focus on what are we going to do for the other 25%. And that's why groups like Dear JCPS and Louisville PTO and KEU. Tell us about KEU. We got about 2 minutes left, Yvonne.
Okay, Kentucky Educators United is a sort of a spin-off from National Educators United. It's teachers all across the country who are supporting more, even before the COVID, more equity in schools, supporting Black and brown kids in schools, fully funded schools through progressive taxation, and professionalizing our profession. You're saying, wait a minute, professionalizing our profession, what are you talking about? Well, let's talk about Arizona. This is in Arizona, the pay is terrible, the classes are huge, the benefits are awful, and schools are super underfunded. So, 1/3 of, in air quotes, educators, of teachers in Arizona are either not certified in the subject they teach or are not certified as teachers at all. You know, that's the future if we keep going down the road of defunding schools and enriching privatizers. That's, if you keep going that route, you become Arizona. We don't want to be Arizona. Arizona doesn't want to be Arizona.
No.
Okay, they went on strike because of that.
Right.
So nobody wants to be Arizona. Not even Arizona wants to be Arizona. So, that all said, that are obviously one of our 2 new concerns are Black Lives Matter in schools and unions, and not until it's safe. You know, a mask is not a magic wand. Don't do that. Don't kill us.
So it's interesting that you added those 2 things at the end, because
We were founded in December, and in March, everything changed.
right. Well, and that segues nicely to something that we're now going into bonus content, because I'm going to have to edit this for the radio, but I do want to bring this up for our Facebook audience, and that is that educators have a responsibility to keep students safe. We can agree with that. When we see educators out on social media exhibiting behaviors that put students at risk, we want them to have an opportunity to learn why that is risky behavior so that they can do better. And the 2 areas where this it seems to be happening a lot is either in racist, culturally incompetent, culturally biased, whatever you want to call it, behaviors that I think we all know what we're talking about. We see these behaviors and we like screenshot them and share them everywhere. And you know what ends up happening is the teachers might even get reprimanded or lose their jobs. And they end up becoming defensive about, well, that's not what I meant, and you took it all wrong. And so they end up kind of doubling down on their mistake instead of creating an opportunity for them to learn and grow as a community so we can all do better. And in fact, you know, I do stupid stuff all the time. And when somebody brings it to my attention, it's natural for you to want to defend yourself and explain yourself. And it's okay to do that to an extent, as long as you're still willing to say, but I can see how that would have harmed you, and I will make an effort to not do it again. That's where we need to take these conversations. So mask wearing is another one. When we see educators out on social media bragging about, you know, I do all these things and I've never once worn a mask and blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? I guess if you want to expose your family, that's your business, but don't bring it into the classroom. And so until we can't have a safe reopening of schools, until we know that these teachers who are exhibiting reckless behavior in either the maskless situation, social distancing situation, or the cultural incompetence, those are situations that we need to be identifying and coaching those educators properly, safely into relearning and examining how they might be mistaken. And so we've created a Facebook group. I've mentioned this to Dr. Polio twice now because I've asked him, what do we do when we come across these situations? So creating an intermediary scenario where, after my first call with him when we talked about this, I started a Facebook group called Teachable Moments. It's Dear JCPS Teachable Moments. And it's still small, you know, we're just getting it started. The idea is we take these screenshots that we've seen from these educators, we mark out their personal information so that it's not going to dox them publicly like some situations we've seen happen. And, you know, maybe they're not in that group, but it might get back to them that, oh, by the way, I think that was your post that was in the group the other day. Maybe they'll come in and be willing to learn. It's worth a shot because doxing them publicly isn't going to get them to change their ways. And we can't risk
just anything, it'll make them more racist.
Right. And we can't risk just ignoring it. There will come a time when school reopens, and these teachers that I think are few and far between need to be put on notice. They need to be given an opportunity to adjust or find a different career, because we can't. Back to our Black families and why they tell us that they can't support an unconditional tax increase is because the district has not done a good job keeping their children safe. And this is part of it. Keeping them safe from racist teachers is a piece of that as well, in addition to the over policing, because a lot of times the police got called because a teacher misunderstood behavior as being violent, when in fact it wasn't. It was just the color of the person's skin that was perpetuating it that made them perceive it. And so we all have implicit biases. It's whether or not we're willing to check them, willing to be held accountable when we exhibit them. So I encourage people to check out the Teachable Moments Facebook group, but also, in addition, after our call with Dr. Polio yesterday, is I said, I asked him again, what about intermediary steps? Because we are, and I brought up the maskless situation now too. We're seeing both examples of dangerous behavior by educators. And so he said, you're right. We do need a way for them to share screenshots, because right now all we tell them to do is call the tip line. And by the way, the tip line is 502-313-HELP. And there is a protocol in place when you see something on social media that you can report, and it does go to their investigative team that is headed up by Jody Wren. And so I inquired about that process, and I said, but what if they have a screenshot? And he said, we do need to come up with something. And I said, is it okay if we just tell people to email them to us? And he said, yes. So until they come up with their own protocols, we have district support in capturing and organizing and sharing, maybe on a weekly basis. We roll up the complaints that are sent to our email address. And that email address, by the way, is teachablemoments@dearjcps.com. And so you can send us some screenshots to that email address, teachablemoments@dearjcps.com. I think that's easy to remember. And we'll mark through the personal information and share them in that Facebook group, but we will also take the non-marked through information and confidentially share it with the investigators, so that there is an opportunity for follow-up with these educators. And again, we're not on a witch hunt, but when these things are seen, we want to nip them in the bud early when they're still coachable and correctable. And that, I see that as being an ally. I want to help you keep your job. I want to help you stand up to other educators when you know and hear something isn't right. And by doing so yourself, you get targeted. We have a lot of complaints along those lines as well. So we're trying to create a safe space. And it may not be perfect, but it's a start, and we can work to make it better once we get something going, because doing nothing is not an option. So what else, Ivonne? Let's wrap it up and get it.
I think you've covered everything. Oh, one quickie thing. We will be having a new town hall, Kentucky Educators United, but we're still getting feedback on how to improve it and working on having breakout rooms. So I don't have a date yet.
And that is a perfect close to how we started the program. Ivonne and I are willing to take risks and be the butt of other people's jokes, because we have to learn this technology too, and we know it's intimidating, and we still haven't figured out how to do Facebook, even though I hear it's really easy. I hear Facebook has breakout rooms. So we're going to keep working, and then once we figure it out, we will be happy to share our knowledge with you. And we appreciate everyone for staying with us and suffering through it with us as we make it better. And I want to point out, you happen to be wearing one of your shirts? I want to point out that you can buy your I Love JCPS t-shirts at ilovejcps.com. The money that is raised helps us pay for the campaign to support the tax increase. We're working on setting up a 501c4. And again, this is the proposal that we submitted to the district back in February. Latasha and I submitted a proposal to the district back in February, and we did not receive the award of the contract. It went to an organization out of Danville, Kentucky, that is advising them on the tax increase strategy, which may be appropriate for the district. We're not trying to implement the district strategy. We're trying to implement grassroots organization strategies, and unfortunately, we hit a few snags. And so we are going to enlist the community's support in understanding the dynamics that are going on behind the scenes that continue to try to push out Black and Black allied voices. While we have a window of opportunity to make some structural change, we're going to push really, really hard, and that's going to make some people uncomfortable.
This has been another episode of Save Our Schools with Dear JCPS. You're hearing from Sidekick Yvonne and the brains of the operation,
I don't know about that.
Gay Edelman.
All right.
Okay then. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.